Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Thanks for joining us. Here's what's making news right now.
When we look at youth that don't have a permanent place to live, there is an unusually high percentage of those youth that identify as LGBTQ2+.
I'm completely baffled about the fact that they were there, and I've spent the past week thinking about, potential reasons why.
Public transit is major. It impacts students. It impacts part-time workers.
We begin tonight by taking a look at a new West End home that will house 10 LGBTQ youth by the end of this month. And it's made out of 8 shipping containers. It started out as an innovative way to create housing quickly, but it ended up a project delayed by 2 years. The CBC's Jason Vio explains.
It's taken us way longer than what we actually thought.
When construction started in April of 2020, Family Services Windsor Essex wanted to have the 6 units opened by the end of that summer. It's now more than 2 years later, and 10 young people will be moving in by the end of this month.
We need to look at any ways to get more housing into the market.
That's what prompted the Social Services Agency to build its own housing for the first time. But what they didn't expect were all the delays.
It was really hard to get contractors. Then as we moved into what I like to call a post-COVID acuity world, we had issues with supply chain.
The project cost $1.2 million, and 2/3 of that was funded through a provincial program. Another reason for the delays, Family Services says the province's building code hasn't caught up to innovations such as container homes. But one urban designer says it's a balancing act.
And the innovation needs to be tested to meet with the code. So they both have a little give and take to do.
He's mostly seen shipping containers used as commercial spaces and doesn't believe this concept has a big role to play in solving the housing crisis.
The cost of outfitting them is probably the biggest impediment. As I mentioned, you have to build interior walls, you have to put in insulation, you have to do structure around openings for windows.
Inside, you can see the 2 shipping containers fused together to make a 2-bedroom unit. Family Services says they focused on LGBTQ youth because there is an unusually high number of them who find themselves homeless.
But we thought if we really want to reach those youth that are least likely to secure permanent housing on their own, we should have a focus on trying to house youth who identify as LGBTQ2+.
They'll range in age from 16 years old to 24, and it's meant to be temporary housing until they can find a place of their own. Family Services will only be charging them what they get from the Ontario Works program for housing, which is roughly $300 per month. The agency is working on 2 other housing projects with the Community Housing Corporation to put a roof over the heads of even more young people. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
We are less than a week from Election Day. Advance polls now closed in Windsor. There was a big jump in turnout, but one voter who has worked elections in the past was surprised by what she saw when casting her ballot: uniformed police officers. The CBC's TJ Deer reports.
She showed up to vote last Tuesday. Laura Pratt was shocked to see uniformed Windsor police officers inside All Saints Church. She'd never seen anything like it before.
I'm completely baffled about the fact that they were there, and I've spent the past week thinking about, potential reasons why, and I haven't yet come up with anything that I can think of that would have necessitated that.
The city's manager of records and elections, Terry Knight-LePain, told CBC News in a statement that police officers were present at all 8 advanced voting days and locations. The officers helped with traffic calming at drive-through voting locations. She said they were inside polling stations to ensure the safety and security of all people, the electoral process, and elections equipment and supplies. When asked if threats have been made, Knight-LePain said she couldn't discuss it, but that police have been at advanced polling stations in past elections.
I just was so surprised to see it, and a little off-put. I mean, elections in Canada are free, they're fair.
Pratt says she has been a scrutineer for provincial and federal elections. She's worried this practice might leave the wrong impression.
I wondered about if you were a newcomer to Canada voting for the first time, how that would make you feel. A lot of the newcomers that we welcome here come from places where free voting isn't a reality, and they're here and they see that.
One political expert gave a reason why certain voters may feel disenfranchised.
There may well be voters who from communities who feel they have not had the best relations or interactions with policing, and they might be put off by being in an area where police are so highly visible.
Simiatiki said municipalities could have hired security guards instead of posting uniformed police officers at voting locations.
Security personnel who have a much more neutral and lower key kind of profile, standing in a space, in an enclosed space, which is what polling stations are, rather than a uniformed police officer.
CBC News asked the City of Windsor if it considered hiring security officers. It did not respond. Knight LePain said there will be no police officers at polls on Monday, when the majority of voters will cast a ballot. TJ Deere, CBC News, Windsor.
Windsor's bus system has come up time and time again as a major municipal issue, one that's top of mind for many voters here in Windsor. For more insight on this, I'm joined now live by B. Zelda. They are the social media manager with Activate Transit Windsor Essex. That's a local advocacy group. Thanks for joining us, B.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll jump right into it. What is at stake this election when it comes to public transit?
There's so much at stake right now, not to sound, incredibly alarmist, but simply put, whether or not the 418X is going to be funded is one of the major things. Whether or not we're going to invest in the Transit Master Plan, whether or not we can recognize transit as an essential service. There's just so much on the line right now. So there's definitely a lot at stake that we have to consider right now in these elections.
And B, your group has put together on your website a candidate scorecard by mayoral race and by ward race as well when it comes to their commitments to transit. So what are the biggest takeaways from that, especially as you say there's so much at stake?
You got it. Yeah, so our transit scorecard for Windsor's municipal elections, we asked them a handful of questions. We asked if they would fund the 418X, which was the proposed route from the University of Windsor to the Tecumseh Mall, a very important lane. We asked them if they would fund the transit garage expansion, which is a pivotal piece to continuing the transit master plan. And we also asked them if they would continue the regional expansion of transit to get the master plan back on its original timeline. And there were a variety of answers. All of this information is also available on our website, activatetransitwindsoressex.ca, or you can visit any of our socials to find the scorecard and all of the details from every ward and the mayoral candidates that responded.
And do you have one or two key impressions that you want to point out for the audience?
Yeah. First off, there was so much more support than I had originally anticipated. It's hard sometimes not to feel a little jaded when you look at the state of transit in Windsor, and we have all these dreams. We put out a community mandate as well with a lot of those same questions that we asked on our scorecard towards City Council, because we have a lot of dreams for transit, and when we don't see those realized right away, it's just a little frustrating. I'm so sorry. What was the original question, though?
That's okay. I just wanted to ask if there was one or two key impressions that you had from that scorecard that you just want to point out to the audience.
Yes. So, okay, that brings me back. Yes. So it was the hope. It was the amount of people and the amount of responses that we got that were for the Transit Master Plan. How many people? Most of the responses that we got, it was everybody answered yes, 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 and yes on our scorecard. We asked them a very basic question at the very end, like, do you support improving transit? Mm-hmm. And while there were folks that said no, the majority said yes. And that just brought a lot of hope. And that wasn't the original impression that I got. So that's kind of been the vibe, and it's really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned before, we've been hearing so much from voters on this issue, and you yourself mentioned your own frustration. I do want to play you some of what we've been hearing from voters in the lead up to the election.
Public transit is major. It impacts students, it impacts part-time workers, it impacts full-time workers that don't make enough money to afford a car, which, given the cost of living, keeps going up.
My daughter lives in Toronto, and I know it's hard to compare, but we don't have a good public transit system.
put more on my taxes and give people free transit.
A lot of people in Windsor are just trying to survive and don't get much money. It just makes sense for the government to chip in on public transit and stuff.
B, what goes through your mind as you hear about how deeply people care about this issue?
I wish that these were the voices that we heard all of the time, because that's what we hear every single day. We put out a survey and a lot of the responses echoed every single one of those statements. To circle back to the very beginning of what's at stake, it's people like that, people in their accessibility to be mobilized. Everybody deserves to be able to move around freely in their own city. And that's kind of the biggest thing that's at stake right now.
Definitely. Thanks for this, B.
Thank you so much.
B. Zelda is the social media manager with Activate Transit Windsor Essex. Monday night, we will have you covered when it comes to election coverage. I will be in studio delivering results for you live, and we'll also have a team of reporters bringing you the latest developments. It all starts at 8 o'clock, just as the polls close. So make sure you tune in online at cbc.ca/Windsor and on CBC Gem. The mayor of Ottawa testified at day 4 of the inquiry into the federal government's invoking of the Emergencies Act last winter. Jim Watson says the city did not have the police resources it needed to end the protest convoy, and other levels of government didn't act quickly enough to step in. CBC's Rafi Bujikanian has the latest.
This is just not something the city was equipped to handle on its own, says the mayor of Ottawa. Something that dawned on him when the first weekend of the convoy protest passed and it didn't clear out.
People started to realize this was turning into a very volatile situation when we started seeing fireworks going off and hot tubs brought in and the behavior.
So began the calls on January 31st, telling the Prime Minister they are asking for RCMP resources. 1 week later, a stronger complaint from the mayor while chatting to Trudeau again.
Nasty people out there that just don't represent Canada. Reminds me of the Republican Party down south.
And pointing out Ontario and Premier Doug Ford are no-shows at what were supposed to be three-way meetings with the feds and the city.
He said, look at what's it going to accomplish? A bunch of people sitting around a table talking and making decisions. And I said, well, that sounds like a cabinet meeting. And he didn't like that.
The Prime Minister also critical. Doug Ford has been hiding from his responsibility on it for political reasons, as you highlighted. And important, we don't let them get away from that.
If the province had participated in these meetings and been more engaged, do you think there would have been less of a delay?
I truly believe it would have. If we're all at the same table, speaking to one another, we can have our arguments back and forth.
And though he says he was not consulted on the Emergencies Act and did not ask for it, ultimately, it only helped.
I saw a whole row of tow trucks parked on Laurier Avenue. I'd never thought I'd see the day where I'm so happy to see a tow truck.
For its part, the province of Ontario says it has fully cooperated with the inquiry, providing ample documents, and adds officials are available to take the stand as witnesses if asked. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Some advocates are raising the alarm over a planned revamp of the Indigenous foster care system. The upcoming federal funding changes are meant to give communities autonomy over Indigenous child welfare, but it is creating uncertainty for many who depend on agencies that have filled the need. Olivia Stefanovich reports.
Keeping families and communities together is the goal of this Indigenous-run Child and Family Services agency.
I went from being homeless to being housed.
I had a very, very good foster parents.
I've never had a child in my care previous to this current experience, so it really helped guide me. It also helped me become involved in the Indigenous community.
But there are fears that progress could roll back under a major revamp of the First Nations child welfare system, diverting funding from agencies to communities.
We have been scrambling over
The executive director says the agency faces a 20% cut of its budget, $10 million by next year.
What we're really worried about is this resulting in a massive spike in kids entering the child welfare system, which is, I think, the opposite direction that we want to go.
Critics say the Liberal government needs to stop taking half measures on reform.
That the federal government wants to download all their obligations, but if they download it without proper funding, children are going to get hurt, and First Nation communities are going to be blamed.
The Indigenous Services Minister says Ottawa will do whatever it takes to ensure First Nations people have autonomy over child welfare.
Will it be seamless? I hope it will be as seamless as possible.
The transition of critical dollars, part of a $20 billion overhaul, Ottawa plans to finalize with Indigenous leaders by the end of the year.
The child that is receiving services would continue to do so, but under a different service delivery arrangement.
But the people who depend on agencies are still stuck in limbo, not knowing whether the services they desperately need will even exist in a few months from now. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
It can be a struggle to pick the perfect holiday card for loved ones. So when one woman in the Toronto area found there were no Diwali greeting cards that she could buy for her relatives, she decided to change that.
Started off as a family project. The kids got involved. Everyone was home for those 2 years, so it was really for our family. We couldn't find any Diwali card on the market, which was very surprising for us. I remember just saying to my husband, like, I can't believe this. It's so many South Asian people and there's nothing. And that's where the idea kind of came that, okay, if there's Christmas cards everywhere, then maybe we should have Diwali cards. We started designing and creating, and then about 6 months later, we had started Mubarak cards. Feathers is a very South Asian type of design. Even our birthday cards, you'll see paisleys at the back. The response, when we started, the response is what blew me away. On Instagram, most small businesses have followings of about 1,000 people. We grew to 10,000 very quickly. So this is our romantic collection. Kuch Kuch Hota is a very famous movie. So when I see you, Kuch Kuch Hota, it means when I see you, I feel right. I feel something. John is basically a loving word to my life. It's one that has been like a huge success. So we started making Diwali gift packages. People are loving having everything put together for them and ready to go. What's really special about our South Asian culture is we actually do have a title for everything. Your mom's younger sister, your mom's older sister, your dad's younger brother is different from your dad's older brother. To actually be able to give someone a card that has the name that you call them was, I think, the most special thing that people really grabbed onto.
That is so cool. Live look outside. And when we come back, one of our favorite people will be here. Stay with us. It is a very special day because we have Colette Kennedy back. Welcome back, Colette.
Thank you, Katerina. I'm so happy to be back. You can't imagine.
Oh my gosh. Well, you can't imagine how happy we are to see you. And I'm sure that so many people want to know how you've been.
Yeah, and you know, I'm doing so much better now. I think mentioned a little bit before I went off, I had to have some surgery on my shoulder and my bicep and whatever. So I'm still kind of in recovery mode, but like way better than I was, and I'm so glad to be on this side of it, so it's all good.
Amazing. And it's a gradual return, so we'll have you for some of the week. We'll have Josiah for the days when you're not here with us, but we're just so happy to have you back.
Thank you.
And now I'll ask you to do what you do so well, which is tell us what's on the go weather-wise.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I haven't done this for a while, so we'll see how well it goes. And I know what you're thinking at home. Oh, she doesn't even know what the forecast area is anymore. Yes, I do, but I'm going somewhere with this. So I want to show you what's happening in northeastern Ontario for friends or those of you who have family and interest there. Snowfall amounts 10 to 15 centimeters, so winter weather travel advisories that are in place. Why do I point that out? Because then, you know, you can do that little comparison. It makes us feel a little bit better that our temperatures might be a bit below seasonal and on the cool side. So there they are, a look at the current temperatures. A few spots, yes, with even a few wet flurries through the overnight hours, more so to the east. Mostly it's the rain shower activity that we're continuing to have, and we're in this pattern. Been some heavy rain through the day through London. Hard to break out of that as these bands just keep rotating around. So down through Windsor and Leamington, through Lakeshore area, you see all of that wet weather. Breezy, of course, at times too. So just a little bit on the unpleasant side. So we do have this dip in the jet stream. So that's a trough. And this is a stubborn area of low pressure. So that trough stays in place and the low stays in place for another 48 hours, and then things begin to break down and change. So even though the low, you'll see it moving away a little bit, still those bands and that rotation carry on. I've kind of simplified this surface map for you in terms of the energy passing by, but that counterclockwise circulation is what's so important. And then what's important is that we finally break out of it as we get Thursday into Friday. Tonight, though, some patchy fog possible. Temperatures down to 4 degrees for the overnight low, 5 degrees for you there in Sarnia, and 8 tomorrow for that daytime high, up to 9 on Thursday. And then, I'm not kidding, once we break out of it, I mean, we really break out of it.
We've missed you.
Oh,
honestly.
Thank you. It's so
thank
sweet.
You
I'm
so
so glad
much for
to be
that.
back.
Oh my gosh, we love having you back, and we'll see you again later this week.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Thanks, Colette. When we come back, we'll have some more news for you. Stay with us.